Okay, so in this video, we are going to go through a numerical example. And this numerical example is kind of similar to the one in the textbook, but it has different numbers. And so the point of it is just to see if it's clear to you. Okay, so you could check out the one in the textbook, and then you could also go over this one and see if it's clear to you. So we have some data on people. So we have, just to make it simple, we have 10 people. We could have more. It's not realistic that we only have 10 people. And so the first thing we need to decide is, well, we need to know our poverty line. So it's not written here, so let me write it at the top. So our poverty line, Z, is 30 per month. Okay, so we're saying our poverty line is $1 a day. And you can look in the textbook. There's definitely problems with this $1 a day line, but I'm just using it as an example. Okay, so first of all, we say, well, how many of our people, we have data on 10 people in our society, that's our population, how many are in poverty? So we're going to make a cutoff right here. So everybody above that line, and we put the people in order. We're going to do some data work in a couple weeks with continuing on with this idea. So everybody above that line is in poverty, and everyone below that line is not in poverty. Okay, so we're only going to perform the calculations for the people above that line. So first of all, it's kind of useful to say, well, are they in poverty? Yes, 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 yes. Yes means is one. One means yes, and then no, 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 no. Okay, that's the idea. Then the second, so if we want to do our head count, we can actually do our head count from that. So our head count measure, we can just calculate it straight away from that. So our head count was Q over N. Well, in this case, Q is 1. We count them, right? This is our Q. So that's 6, because there's 6 people who are in poverty. And our N is the total number of people. So there's 10 people. Okay, so then that means our head count is 0.6, or you can say 60%, right? So this is our head count measure. And so we can calculate that easily from this data. And then the second thing we want to get is our depth measure. Okay, so let's go ahead and get our depth measure. So to get our depth, we have to say, well, how far below the poverty line are each of these people? So the poverty line is 30. And so this is going to be 30 minus 8. So that would be 22. And then the 30 minus 10, and so on. Okay, so I won't talk, and I'll just finish in the rest. Okay, and then we don't do the calculation for the people who are not in poverty. We don't calculate for them. Okay, so we don't calculate for them. And then if we want to, we can add up our total depth down here at the bottom. And I believe this adds up to, I figured out the numbers already. I believe this adds up to 76. So what this is this is our total poverty gap. And that's our total poverty gap there, right? And so that's it. Well, if we had $76 a month in this tiny society, we would be able to bring all the people who are in extreme poverty up to the poverty line. That's what that tells us. That's how much it would cost us every month in transfers to bring them to that number. Then finally, how do we calculate severity? Well, we just take the depth and we square it, right? So we're going to take the 22 and we square it, and we take 20, that's 484. We take 20, we square it. We take 16 and square it, and so on. And again, we don't do the calculation for these because those people are not in poverty, so they're part of the population, but they're not part of the population that's in poverty. And then we can add these up, and I believe if my calculations are right, I come up to 1274. Okay, and so again, that is the sum of the severity. So this was, I forgot to write it, this was up to Q. Okay, so that's the sum of the severity is there. Okay, 1274. And I don't really have a good interpretation of that. Now, given this information, it's very easy then to calculate those other two measures that we just saw. Okay, so I derived them earlier, but once you derive them, then you can just use them. So for the first one, so for the one with this one, the one about depth or average poverty gap, we already have most of the information right here. Only thing we need to add to that was the 1 over n times z. So let's go ahead and do that. So we got 1 over n times z times this thing, but we already know this thing because we already have it right there. So we're going to get 1, and the population is 10, and the population is 10, and the average is this 30, right? The poverty line, sorry, is 30, and then this other number is 76. So yeah, we're just going to get 76 over 300, and so that is going to give us 0.253. Okay, so that is our average depth. And so uh, that gives us kind of our average depth kind of idea. Okay, so if people are falling deeper into poverty, that number will get closer to 1. And if people are, if things are improving and people are closer to the line, even if the number of people in poverty doesn't change, that number will get closer to 0. Okay, so that's our idea. And then finally, I'll just do it on the side here so we don't run out of, so we can keep our numbers with us. Finally, let's go ahead and do the one for severity. Okay, so this one for severity. And so we're using, again, we got the formula already. So we just need to add this part to the thing we just calculated. Okay, so we just need to add this n times z squared. So n is 10 and z is 30, so we got to square 30. And then we know this other part because we just calculated it. So this is going to end up being this 1274 divided by 9,000. Okay, 1274 divided by 9,000, which gives us 0.142. Okay, so now on their own, this last one is our severity number. Okay, so this is about severity. This is about severity, and this is about the gap, the depth. On their own, these last two numbers are not very meaningful. When they do become meaningful, I mean, you know it's closer to 1 or closer to 0, but when they do become meaningful is if there's some kind of significant change in the society. These will give us a more accurate picture of what's going on with people than the head count. The head count can miss things that this one will catch. Okay, and they give us some examples in your textbook about that. Whereas, like, for example, and I'll do a numerical example in just a second, I'll come back to it. But if for example, the person who, if somebody, there was some kind of income shock, right, and people's incomes fell, then depth and severity are going to get much bigger, but the poverty head count may not change much, right? Let's suppose all the people who are not in poverty stay out of poverty, then the poverty head count will totally miss it, but depth and severity will increase quite a bit, right? So it's a little more sensitive to these specific changes of income for individuals, whereas the other one is less sensitive because it's only counting when people cross a certain line. So in another video, I'll come back and give you an example of that in case you want to look at something besides the one in the textbook.